like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have a relatively long neck. Also, when they're lying down, they're kind of congesting part of the neck, so you may not, like even on me, I could probably get 6 when I'm standing. I possibly could only get 4 or 5. So you're getting a sense, if they say something, then there's a reason to check further, then you start getting, so let's say we said number 4, you want to get more information, you can go around 4, 4, 1, 4, 2, 4, 3. You could then get more minute if you want. But I'm not on any particular vertebra I'm doing it. I'm just scanning the areas.
Okay. Yeah, and you mentioned C4, C5, typically thyroid issues is what you think of first?
No, not necessarily, but C4, C5, sort of like in contrast with C3. So C4, C5 can show in thyroid, but it can also show on its own, because it can be a structural.
Yeah, that's what I'm coming
and
from.
not necessarily affecting. So if you have something, so if you're looking at assuming you know how to count these things, if you're looking at C5, possibly C6, C5 and below, structurally is when it affects the arm. Okay, so if you're finding something above C5, okay, you are not going. It's not responsible for what's going on in the arm. Okay, because that's not where the nerves to the arm come from. Okay, so so just kind of like in our own minds, just sort of that. But basically, so if you're finding C3, phrenic nerve, on the right side we tend to use level 1. On the left side we tend to use spleen 1, or look into the possibility that it's cardiac. Okay? So left side could be cardiac. So then, if you're finding C4, I use stomach 9. If you're finding C5, I use large intestine 11. So I just go behind stomach 9. If you're finding C6 or C7 one-sided, that's a heart 3. Heart 3 is very good for C7 and or L5 one-sided.
And when you're helping the occiput, are you going just below the protuberance?
Yeah, but you can go a little bit on the bone as well. It's not it's not that exact. So, and in fact, I would say that don't take this too seriously, but kind of it used to be that we said the bone itself was more hormonal, and below the bone, the tissue below the bone, is more autonomic nervous system. But I don't hold me to it. It's hard to tell exactly what's going on. Hormonal tends to be more lateral, gallbladder and out. Whereas autonomic nervous system will tend to take the whole space, but you have to figure out which it is. Now, by the way, hormones and nervous system are very strongly correlated. They're very similar. Besides the fact that these are two systems that communicate with each other and affect each other, also they're very similar in Chinese understanding, because the character Du, which is translated as, it's actually very good translated as governor, okay, to oversee something. The character actually has a big eye and hands picking up the beads. Okay, so you're overseeing the people who are doing the work. Okay, what it implies. Okay, so if you're, whatever, the count, the duchess, whatever, that owns these fields, you're not overseeing the people picking up the beads. Okay, you have someone else that does the work, that does that work for you. They're a trusted, maybe a cousin or something, but they're someone that you trust to do that work for you. That's a governor. So in a larger scale, if you're Queen Victoria, you have a governor for India. Okay, that governor works for you. That governor is not going to steal India from Queen Victoria. It's very important, for the Queen, that the governor is not going to overtake. Okay. Now, so in the body, we have a Du channel, right? That supervisor or governing, channel. So what does it mean? Okay? And what does it mean, for example, when we have a point that's called Du Shu, Q16? Okay? So that, when we look at systems in the body that are acting like governors, there's basically two of them. Okay? Hormonal system and nervous system. Because they both seem to govern, they dictate what's going on, but they are not the ultimate decision maker. The ultimate decision maker is the brain. In other words, the brain is Queen Victoria, and these, the hormonal system and the nervous system are the governors of India, kind of thing. Okay, so both of those to me relate to the do. Okay, nervous systems and hormonal systems, and that goes, correlated. So that, and they both reflect on under the oxygen.
When you said, I just wanted to clarify, when you said that it, with hormonal it's usually, or no, with autonomic it's more spread out, what did you mean?
So autonomic nervous system is the whole area from Du16 all the way to the mastoid, is autonomic nervous system. So within that you have an area that's called Anyan.
Yes.
Okay, good sleep. That also reflects autonomic. But you also have further out, for example, here you have, I think it's Sanjal 19, a resting skull. You have the empty brain. You have this whole area is full of points that sort of suggest, something to do with the nervous system, or being able to smooth the nervous system. Okay, and the so this whole area is autonomic nervous system, but this part of the area closer to Du16 is not, but gallbladder 20 and outside is hormonal.
Okay.
And you can also say that hormonal tends to be a little further up, but that I won't guarantee.
But you were comparing it to just GB20, or you were making a distinction between what would show up as hormonal and what would show up as autonomic.
Autonomic will tend to show, can show anywhere from Du16 out to outside of GB20.
Okay.
Hormonal shows GB20 and outside.
Okay, thanks for
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One question, so these points around here, remember you were talking about the edge of the cap yesterday?
Yeah.
Do you consider that, could those
These?
possibly be considered, or not really? You know what I mean?
I would say no, and the reason why, you're talking about like Sanjay points here? Or
Yeah,
other
she's
points?
like sometimes, lately she's been into like 18 too, like crazy vessels, like, so I'm just.
No, I would say no, because,
Is it really helpful? No.
this is more like a hook.
Yeah.
I mean, a cap means, it's the same counter that exists in spleen 20. Okay, it's sort of, to me it implies like rounded. Like City Hall has a cap on it. I know that's not what it's called. It's more like a dome. But if you're starting to get here, it means that like.
I was thinking because of the hairline.
Yeah. No. But because then I think that it would probably say, because these points are not necessarily in the hairline.
Okay.
So no, I think that my sense, because I don't really know, but my sense of what's going on here is that, well, first of all, once you get into, but also by the way, gallbladder 18 is more like here. Now that makes sense. But if you're talking about here, in other words, if you're talking about what is it, gallbladder 8, 9, 10. Yeah. So 8, 9, 10, 11, those have to do with they use it like here we have one. These have to do with ear or eyes. We use them for cataract and tinnitus. Okay, but the 18 is basically here. So yes, I would say that can still be in the marrow, the cap thing. So and again, this is a different interpretation than Kiiko's, obviously. So because it's kind of like, why are they working so well? Okay, because marrow. Okay, so there's an expression in Lingshu 33. It talks about the four oceans. There's an ocean of grains, and there's an ocean of whatever blood, and there's an ocean of chi, I believe, and then there's an ocean of marrow. Okay, and on the ocean of marrow, it says that if there's too little, these are the symptoms, and if there's too much, it says that there'll be ease, sturdiness, and lots of strength. Okay, so it's a good thing to have a lot of marrow, where it's not a good thing to have a lot of blood. If there's too much blood or too much grain, these are things that are not good. Just like too little is not good. Okay, so with ease, okay, ease is, it's obviously a good thing. Okay, and the character that is Ching, it's like a boat that moves along the river. Okay, that's what Ching is. The opposite of ease is, in regular language you may say guan, like no peace. Okay, but in technical terms it won't be called restlessness. Okay, so normally when and in most languages, the opposite of easefulness is in a negative. It's very interesting, like I ask around, because I want to see that. So there's something about in the human, in human cultures that sort of ease is apparently is a desired natural state, and the opposite of it is only defined as opposite for some reason. Okay. So so restlessness is actually a state. It is considered a state of mind. I'm looking at like technical psychological literature from Chinese, from 1500s, 2000 years ago. Okay, Buddhist literature. Okay, how they, because that's their equivalent of psychology. For nowadays we have more a separate field. So Diaozhu is the opposite. Okay, and that's considered a state of mind. Okay, it's technically it's filed under a negative mental formation. Okay, a non-positive mental formation. Okay, so sorry, we started. What was the original question?
Was that about the edge of the cat?
Oh, so sorry.
Yes.
So when you're looking at marrow, you're creating ease. You're countering, things like the jumpiness of the crazy vessel, or the fear of the fright. And again, this gallbladder 17 unfortunately can be interpreted many ways, because Jen Yin can be, you can say it's supporting it's the upright nourishment by words, or you can say there is that expression that together means, like fearful. Okay, the name for gallbladder 17. Okay, and so it's very hard to, since I don't know the etymology of all these things, I can't say when that expression Daniel became fearful, and if the person who made up the point name meant that, or if they meant it, we just don't know. But because all of these do calm the nervous system, that is actually their main function, calm the nervous system and reduce pain. And because they calm the nervous system, they also affect the digestive system. Okay, because, and again, would they have affected the digestive system 20 years ago when we didn't say there was a strong connection between brain chemicals and the intestines? Maybe not, because again, these are cultural things. We just don't know how points, like what the story is. But since nowadays we say, well, most of your dopamine is really made up in the intestines and blah, blah, that the intestine is so important for brain function, these points also, because they affect the nervous system, they affect the digestion. So my interpretation of these points, and the reason what we're talking about is because, in the last year, this has been Kiiko's mainstay. These are the workhorses now. Gallbladder 15, 16, 17. And what my interpretation of these points is that they're marrow. They're the equivalent of producing marrow, of encouraging marrow. That's kind of my idea about it. That's all. Anyone else? Well, let's start with autonomic nervous system issues, in which case. So, with autonomic nervous system, there's no clear reflex for them, okay, in the body. Some things we say, well, like 4 o'clock, 8 o'clock, we say if you have that, you're supposed to have adrenals, okay? But with autonomic nervous system, there are some places in the body that we can say relate to it, but they can relate to a whole bunch of other things, and people can still have autonomic nervous system disorders without showing that. So the big one is the tight SCN, okay, because that's congesting on the parasympathetic nerve, the vagus nerve, okay. So that's the big one. A tight diaphragm is a sign of autonomic nervous system. And in fact, we used to have like this thing that we call hyperstate of the diaphragm. And I'm assuming that was a translation of some cute Japanese term. But it means that a diaphragm that's really overstretched and is not, not allowed. So therefore, there's no good parasympathetic feedback to the body. You can have the people who will have tightness here, liver 12 area. You can call it liver 12, you can call it spleen 12. Okay, either way, liver 12. Spleen 12 is called the gate of the Chang, of rushing up. Liver 12 is called the rushing pulse. It's a different rush. Maybe it should be translated hasty pulse. Okay, so either way, they have a anxiousness in them. Okay, so people who are anxious, they're sort of tightening here, which again, it's the edge of the psoas. In anxiety, the psoas is going to get involved, since it's a lot harder to check the psoas. On the body, it's a lot easier to sort of get it from its attachment. Okay, I mean, you all know that in order to get the psoas, you have to bend the leg and dig like hell. Well, if you're talking about thin needles and not a huge amount of insertion, you're never going to get the psoas here. Even if you can go into stomach 30 and maybe get something, but generally speaking, it's not a great way to get the psoas. So then people with autonomic nervous system often will have REN 17, and they will often have REN 9 pulse. On the back, they're going to show T5, T7, and inner border of the left scapula. Okay, so that was a discussion that we had yesterday about do the rhomboids reflect the autonomic nervous system? In a sense, they do, because of when the nervous system is tight, you will tend to, the diaphragm is not going to operate, okay, and therefore the rhomboids are going to start getting overly stretched out. But I find it more on the left side, and I'm assuming that it's correlated to the pacemaker, because that's an autonomic function, so you see the electrical function there. And then you have the occiput reflects the autonomic nervous system. But if you want truly like the pathognomonic for autonomic system, according to this system, okay, it's a pulse. Okay, so this is a pulse that now going to call tight pulse. Okay, and what tight pulse means is at the top, and I'm using the word wiry incorrectly right now. At the top, the pulse feels thin and wiry, meaning it has an edge, a juggedness to it. And when you press on it, it either disappears altogether or it changes. That quality, that jugged, thin quality disappears, meaning it becomes wider, possibly soft and softer, and not possibly.
At the top.
At the top, when you touch the pulse, it feels. You would probably call that kind of pulse thin wiry. Okay? There's no such thing as thin wiry pulse. It's not possible. I'll explain that in a second. When you press on it a little bit, that quality, that disappears, and also the thinness often becomes wider. Okay? So that's a pulse that we call autonomic nervous system pulse. Okay? Now, the reason why wiry here is a misnomer is because wiry, by definition, is an excess pulse. Okay. Tight is not an excess pulse. Tight is, well, it's not a deficient pulse either, but it's not an excess pulse. So to use but the thing is, because everybody understands wiry in today's world as a juggedness, it's easier to say the word wiry for that. But when we say, for example, remember yesterday the guy, Grant, and he did not have a wiry pulse, which is the dogma that he's supposed to have a wiry pulse because of Parkinson's. Okay, but he has an aggressive quality to the pulse, so I can interpret that as okay, maybe that's part of the deal. Okay, it doesn't have to be exactly wiry. Okay, so actually, do you mind closing that window, Bobby, there? Because it'll be quieter. Thank you. So that pulse that has a jagged edge, it changes quality when you press, that's your clear, clear indication it's an autonomic nervous system. Okay? But most of us can't really tell. It's hard, it takes time to sort of get it, to get tuned into that particular pulse. Because it's not a pulse that you learn in school and, it's like you all know slippery and wiry and you all know weak and strong, but, that's a little, it's a more subtle sort of situation here, okay? Then in autonomic nervous system, first of all, you have to make sure that, do take the pulse. Even though it doesn't look like I use the pulse a lot, the first thing you need to know is that if the person has a rapid pulse or slow pulse. Because slow pulse, we don't stimulate lower abdomen. Okay? Slow pulse also, under the third toe is not a good point for a slow pulse person unless they clearly have that tight quality in the pulse. Okay? And also, liver 12's area is not a good solution for slow pulse type person. Treat it as a little bit as if it's like lower abdomen. Okay. So rapid pulse, for example, we use REN6 for autonomic nervous system. I can't remember who it was yesterday that I said, I'd rather use REN6 over REN4 because it tends to be better for autonomic nervous system issues. So the first thing you're looking at with autonomic nervous system type is release the SCM. I don't think I showed you yesterday. We had a grant, but it wasn't clear to see that it releases the SCM. But Sanjiao 8, 1/3 up from the wrist, is my main point for releasing opposite side SCM. Okay? There are supporting.
Yesterday on Grant, he used the Sanjiao 8, and he had a super rapid pulse, and I was kind of wondering why you didn't use 5.
Yeah, because it wasn't really easy for me to check anything, and I checked 8. Against this was only, if I recall correctly, there was only like the back pain to check against, and 8 originally he said that made it into a 0. So that's what I went for that. Yeah, I could have used 5. Absolutely. It's really interesting when you teach and you hear people ask questions, and you realize that there are 20 different ways to do the same thing.
Right.
And you just have, and sometimes you ask to justify. And you go, and I'm not making excuses because sometimes, I'm telling you the honest truth, sometimes I don't have a justification. This is what, and it could be that at that moment, I honestly don't remember what happened. At that moment, that's what happened to me, and I may have forgotten he had a rapid pulse for all I know. I have no clue.
I think that my take home from that really is that you don't have, it's not like the needling, not needling abdomen with a slow pulse. Like when it comes to Sanjiao 5 versus Sanjiao 8.
And you'll do a lot of Sanjiao 5s for regular pulses, by the way.
He does it and then there's a slow pulse.
Yeah, exactly. So the original was really, Sanjiao 8 was the original, and then came Sanjiao 5 possibly for rapid, but it was really to release the SC in the original, and that's why my thinking tends to be more for Sanjiao 8. The original release for opposite side SC was Sanjiao 8. So I always tend to go there. But somebody, I think it was 2 weeks ago, somebody said to me, because I do this whole, I try and give you a systematic approach to a system, okay? Or make it look like a system. So I tell you, you take the medical history, you check the abdomen, you make up a story, you test your story. If you tested the story and the story proved correct, you go ahead and kneel. If you tested the story wasn't good, it didn't clear the abdomen, make up another story. So I'm like treating this patient, and then somebody says, "What's your story?" So here I am, I'm like advocating this whole make sure you have a story, and I'm like, well, I kind of have a half-assed story that's, that's sort of made up what my real story is. I really want to clear this finding, which is what I tell you do not do. It's like, in clinic, in practice, there's like the theory of what the system looks like. And then there's the practice of well, I really want to clear red 9. Can I really tell you, correlate the medical history and blah, 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 and tell you exactly why he has this red 9? Sometimes I'm coming up with an interesting story, like, oh, that wisdom tooth thing that you had pulled out and created an infection, and wow, blah, 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 blah. I treat the wisdom tooth, and wow, Ren 9 pulse disappeared. Without me doing wushu or whatever, the usual stuff for Ren 9. Okay? That's when it gets kind of fun and interesting. But sometimes it's like, I'm just, it's like, this is your biggest finding. I believe that if I clear that, everything will start falling. Okay? So when I say make up a story, it really means find that piece of domino that when you knock it over, everything else gets knocked out. Okay, that's, it doesn't necessarily mean that I have a real, because the problem is that sometimes I say to people, your job is, our job as acupuncturists, we're like Scheherazade. We keep making up stories. And the moment that it's successful and you don't get killed, you don't need to tell more stories, you needle. But as long as you haven't been successful, you keep having to tell another story kind of thing. But the stories are not always quite as verbal. The story is just like, well, I wasn't successful releasing it with what I thought would, so I'm moving on to the next strategy. Okay? So it's always, but the thing is that there is a lot of freedom. That's really the point to take, is that there's a lot more freedom in all this than just use the protocols. Okay? And you can use the protocols. There's nothing wrong with using protocols. You should, in fact, use protocols for probably 6 months at least to get used to them. The problem is, for me, is I see people who've been taught only the protocols and not a way of thinking, and they can't break away from them. Okay, so that's, every teaching, there's no teaching that is absolutely true. It just doesn't exist in any field. Each teaching, each theory we come up with is a counter, is a medicine for something. That's a problem. So I'm teaching the way I teach because I'm seeing a problem with the way it's taught. And I used to teach a systematic, David Euler and I were the first people who started teaching a systematic approach to Kiiko because it was necessary. It wasn't because, we thought this was the system or anything. Because people would go to Kiiko's classes and they go, I don't understand what she's doing. This is all very cute, but it's like all I'm seeing is, oh, is this better? Oh, is this better? And I can't comprehend it. I can't put anything around it that will make sense to me. And they wanted something that would excite. So we independently, we started creating a system and make it more explainable. And little by little, that also rubbed a little, well, I don't know if it rubbed on Kiiko, it's hard to know. But Kiiko started doing a little bit of that also. But, she is by nature, she gets very excited about wanting to do something. And she's not as interested in making sure people understand. It's just her personality, it's fine. So for a long time in the 90s, I totally taught you do this for this, and this for this, and this for this. And then as other people started teaching the system, I realized I would go and teach in places where other people were teaching. Okay? And I would go, wait a second. These people they know all the protocols, they can argue, they can tell me stuff, and I'm like, wow, you're really good. I mean, you know all this stuff, you have all the information, and yet you can't implement it well. Like, I can see what they're doing. Like, there's something limiting when we teach protocol. So I went totally the other way around, and I'm teaching the anti-protocol approach to it, but that has problems too. So I always say to people, go, do it, study this with more than just me. Take classes with other people. Of course, you want to take classes with Kiiko, even though I know that for some of you, taking class with Kiiko can be frustrating. I know that. I totally recognize it. But the thing is, don't look at it as an experience to learn new information necessarily, although you hopefully will. Look at it as an experience to see how another person with a lot of experience approaches things. Then you kind of solve it. That's why I tell people, don't take so many notes. Just get into the gestalt of it. It's okay. You don't have to know every single protocol because they're all written down anyway. 25 years ago, Kiiko used to say, well, if you don't remember what to do, you have it in your notes, and it was obviously that must be what she was doing in her clinic at some point. She said, You say to the patient, excuse me, I have to wash my hands. And you look up in your notes and forget the hands, who cares if they're clean or not, kind of thing. So, you know, I mean, we use whatever tricks we need to in order to get the information. You know, you cannot guarantee the information is going to be in your brain at the moment that the patient shows up. You can only guarantee that you will open up to being able to use what you can. That's all. Does that make sense? So I don't know why I did 8 and not 5 on him. Anyway, so first thing is release the SCM with autonomic nervous system. We're on autonomic nervous system. Okay, so check the SCM very carefully. Make sure you're doing Sanjay. Your last thing you're going to want to do now, this is where it gets weird. You will use the pericardium. You check pericardium 8. If it's painful, you do pericardium 3 and 5, metal water. If it's not painful, you use either pericardium 4, 3 fingers below, or pericardium 6. You choose between either one. Okay. Now, for example, Kiiko almost never uses the pericardium for autonomic nervous system nowadays. Okay, so. The thing is, when I tell people, it's not a big trick to use pericardium points, okay? Especially if they have Ren 17 pain, that's a pericardium move point. That's why I reserve it for last. Now notice you've got a little bit of a problem. If you've done Samjal 8, you have to kind of pull the needle out slightly to turn our hand over to be able to do the pericardium and to flip it. But because generally the way I work, I check all the points first. I don't start needling until I've checked as much as I can. So I can do pericardium first because I already know that Sanjal 8 is a good, I've already checked the effect of Sanjal 8, not just on the SCM, but on everything else. Okay, so that's why I allow myself to do pericardium relatively early. For rapid pulse, Ren 6 is a very good point for autonomic nervous system as well as liver 12. And liver 12 we needle, it's 45 degrees up and in. So it's towards the center but up. Kiiko recently seems to be, well, for one thing she likes to call it now spleen 12 and she needles it more towards the pubic bone. Okay, so it's more like totally in. I tend to do up towards the torso and slightly in. So you can think about it as if I'm aiming it towards Ren 6. Okay. On the back, do 2 is very important to autonomic nervous system. Small intestine 9-10, between 9 and 10, and needle towards the deltoid. There's a big sympathetic plexus there. Okay, so you're trying to calm that down, and you're also, by doing that, you're stretching the back out. Okay, so you're opening the upper thoracics. Oh, autonomic nervous system type people also can show upper thoracics. Okay, from, I would say T7 to T2. Don't forget that there's a strong connection between thyroid problems and autonomic nervous system problems, and between adrenal and autonomic nervous system. So now we've done four categories, 4 boxes: the immune box, the adrenal box, the thyroid box, and the autonomic nervous system box. Okay. There's a strong correlation between those 4 boxes. Okay, so. Somebody that's, I'm going to make it sound like it's a Shanghai Lung style, thing. Somebody has weak immunity, it's going to pull on their adrenals. Okay? When it pulls on their adrenals, it's going to start pulling on their nervous system. And the adrenals and the thyroid are sort of come together as an axis. Okay, adrenals, thyroid, and gonads are in one axis, which is opposite the axis on which parathyroid stands. Okay? Now you can see it very clearly in menopausal women. The gonads go down, okay? And what happens? They start leaching calcium out of the bone. They get osteoporosis. That's parathyroid getting strong. That is the reason that Nagano gives to adrenal treatment the kidney, tonify the adrenal, plus kidney 27. Kidney 27 subdues the parathyroid. Okay? So if you're boosting the adrenals or the gonads, you want to subdue the parathyroid at the same time because that will make the adrenals stronger. Okay? So, and then on the back, besides do 2, it's more just in 9-10 area, you want to do, this correlation. So, but someone can be autonomic nervous system type, and that will start pulling on their adrenals and pulling on their immune. So it doesn't have to start, external invasion, in towards the nerves, but it can actually be the opposite, that there's a weak nervous system, and eventually, because if you're always jittery, your immune system is going to go down, okay? And your adrenals will go down. And the adrenals and the thyroid and the nervous system and the thyroid are highly correlated, okay? So all 4 of them sort of create, a vicious cycle. Once one of them is down, you can assume that the other 3 will be affected. Now, with men, you can usually take the thyroid out of the equation, so you're talking about 3. Okay, because men are a lot less susceptible to thyroid problems. It happens, but it's not super common. Okay. What I would say about autonomic nervous system and men is any male urogenital problem. It's less so with women. There are stress-related issues with women in gynecology, absolutely. And your hormonal cycle, ultimately, if you're using your cholesterol to build up cortisol, you have less of it to build up estrogen. It's a simple equation, okay? So the more stress hormones you have, okay, the more you're going towards the stress equation of the hormonal cycle, the less availability you're going to have for estrogen. So yes, stress has a very clear physiological effect on women, in women's gynecology, there's no doubt about it. But in men, the autonomic nervous system is super related to the urogenital issues. You can look at it, this is the way I look at it, that's just my image, but I can just tell you that, clinically it works. In there, traditionally we have sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, okay, and they're exclusive. If you're in sympathetic mode, you're not going to be in parasympathetic mode, okay? When you're running away from a dinosaur, you're not digesting food, and you're not saying to the dinosaur, excuse me, let me go to the bathroom and let me wipe my butt, and then I'll keep running. You have a break, Mr. Dinosaur, okay? That's just not, that's not how the sympathetic nervous system works, okay? You just run like hell. Again, all your digestive system sort of shuts down. That's the ideal, the ideology. And in parasympathetic, if you're digesting, you're not running away from a dinosaur. So they're basically exclusive. There is one place where both systems have to work together, okay, and that's in sex, okay, and it's very clear in men. There has to be a sympathetic, it has to be a push of blood out, and there also has to be a parasympathetic relaxation, for the actual ejaculation. So because of that, in men, more particularly, the nervous system is highly correlated with the urogenital system. And I literally mean urogenital as opposed to just sexual systems, because men who've had, for example, hernias, urinary blockages, for example, I release, stomach 9 is going to be very important for them. I release stomach 9 first and needle stomach 9. So I've had a number of urinary blockages or prostate surgeries and things like that. And after that treatment, because if they have to put a catheter in, it's very unpleasant. Okay, and they, I had one patient after the first treatment. He went to the bathroom and said, "Wow, I can pee without the catheter." And he said, "I want to make an appointment for the next day." And I usually, I hate seeing somebody the next day. First of all, it's boring for me, but also it's a big danger. If somebody has good results, then they come the next day and you don't do as good a job. It's like, really, if they wait a week, you can blame it on somebody else. But if I just don't like people. But he really wanted blah, 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 so I did. And after the second treatment, everything was fine.
Yeah, testing stomach 9 and some reflux.
Probably like KD11, yeah. Well, KD11, Red 3, stuff like that. Yeah. Women's gynecology supposedly shows kidney 13, stomach 28. Male gynecology shows lower. Male gynecology goes closer to the pubic bone. And the reason why is because our sex organs are lower. You know, it's like our bladder is in the same place, but we don't have a uterus, you know, for kidney 13. And we don't have, so, you know, and the prostate is lower, you know, than kidney 13. So,
Needling stomach 9 is really related to ANS then for this. And in this case, it's not related to any sort of.
to the red thing.
school.
No, okay, wait. Okay, so again, you know, so you have a whole other theory, which is a school theory, but you know, it just shows you that there's correlations between the two. So you have the character for Ren. The character for Ren is this. Okay. Sorry, the other way around. It's a little bit longer. Okay, yeah, my Chinese sucks. Okay, I used to, when I lived here, and I would try and give people patients recipe, prescriptions to go to Chinatown to fill them out. Some of them would come back and say they won't fill it out for me. Because they said that your acupuncturist is a kindergarten, because this is not nice writing. But now it's not a problem because you can just type it in. So they don't know who I am. They think I'm like some, PhD from Beijing or something. I don't care. Anyway, this is the character Ren. Okay. Now, as you know, actually, I think it is the other way around.
No, it's right.
Yeah. Are you okay? Now, they translate Ren into conception vessel. That is absolutely wrong, because conception, let's say that's new, okay? This is conception, okay? This is woman. A woman sitting cross-legged, that's basically what this picture is, okay? Nice women, I'm always fucked up with my strokes. It's like you just have to, see if Philip is here, he can write it out, but I'm here, okay. But, I think, anyway, this is woman with work, with responsibility. This is man or human with responsibility. Conception vessel is not written with woman. To conceive is this character, is with a woman. Okay? With a man, it means responsibility. Okay? So, I don't know who was the original translator of Ren channel and decided that it means, conception vessel. That's a connotation that they had with it, which is appropriate. That's fine. We all know that the red vessel in gynecology and blah, 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 blah. But that's not a translation of the character. The character is with a person. And this thing here, this is work gone. And this is like, if you're carrying the buckets of water, in China,
The yolk.
I don't know what it's called in English, or in Chinese actually, but it's the yoke. It's a big stick that you can put a bucket on each side, because if you have one bucket only, it allows you to carry two buckets on your shoulders, basically. Okay. So if this is Ren, okay, so Kiiko is saying, well, you have, the Ren channel is vertical, but you have two horizontal things at the top and the bottom, okay? So, kidney 11 is called the horizontal bone, Hengu. Okay? Stomach 9, now they're not on the red channel. The red channel is this line here. But there are, she's kind of saying, well, these are part of the whole thing. So, kidney 11 is the horizontal bone. Stomach 9 is called Yin. Okay, welcome human. But the hyoid bone, it's a floating bone, and that's in Chinese. It's Hengu. Okay, the horizontal bone. So you have a horizontal bone and a horizontal bone on each side. And then by point A, you have spleen 15 is called Daheng, the big horizontal. Okay, because every vertical has to have something. There's no vertical without a horizontal, right? Vertical is only defined in opposition to horizontal. Horizontal is only defined in opposition to vertical. Okay, so this guy here, okay, and so we'll always only use one side spleen 15 because it's like you're balancing this thing. So if you do both, you're just basically, you're stuck where you were before, so you didn't do anything. So you're kind of trying to tip this in order to balance the person, so you'll use spleen 15 most likely on one side. But you can use stomach 9 to fix kidney 11, and you can use kidney 11 to fix stomach 9 possibly, and you can add spleen 15 to it. So since in male, so what Christine is saying is in male gynecology issues, it reflects on kidney 11, and I'm saying I'm releasing stomach 9 and needling stomach 9 as an autonomic nervous system issue. Yes, there's also another interpretation for it, which is I'm needling stomach 9 to affect downwards in the red channel. Okay, so I can look at it both ways, absolutely. Yes.
Could you just repeat what you said? You use stomach 9 to affect
Kidney 11 and
11.
kidney 11. I can use kidney 11 to affect stomach 9.
Okay.
They're both horizontal bones.
Yes.
Okay, so they affect each other. You know, we believe, you know, our explanation to it is through their connection through the red channel. Okay.
Would you also just mention again, you mentioned for men, you test kidney 11 and REN 3, but for women,
Women we
sexuality,
use,
you test which one?
with women it's kidney 13, stomach 28. Kidney 13 is uterus reflex, stomach 28 is ovary reflex.
Okay.
Okay, but with men, those will tend not to show. They'll, you know, something low will show with men. Okay. So, autonomic nervous system. Where are we at? Yes, you.
Did you say for men kidney 11 and REN 3?
Yeah, can we run 2 also?
Okay.
Okay, but REN 3 is bladder mood point. Okay, so, you know, when I say your genital, so that means also bladder as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Now,
When you're doing autonomic, you mentioned releasing SCM first. Is there something in the ordering that you want to release the meths before you can treat the rest of the body?
No.
Or release the
When I
diaphragm
say
before you can
first-
treat the rest of the body?
No, okay, so okay. When I say release first, it doesn't mean that it has to be the first thing that you do, because if at all possible, I want to check all my ideas before I start needling. Then which order I needle is not so important. In a way, there'll be a counter to that in a moment. So when I say first I need, it's one of your primary things to do. It's a primary thing to do. If you have a tight SCM, you can't ignore it. You know, it's just not something that you can say, oh, well, it doesn't matter. I mean, it might be for a patient every so often, but generally speaking, tight SCM is important because it makes the connection between the brain and the body not whole, so to speak. Okay, so you can't ignore it. That's what I mean by first. Now, if you're looking for an order, okay, the order should be clear the lower abdomen upwards, okay, because it's like you want the foundation built before you build the roof. Okay, so releasing REN 17 before you released, you know, stomach 28, say, is not quite the way we do it. But this is a nice ideology. Okay? It doesn't always work in practice. Sometimes in order to release something lower, something higher had to have happened. Okay, so this is why I'm giving you some of these priorities. Releasing the neck is a priority. Okay, dealing with the autonomic nervous system is a priority. If they have autoimmune disorders, that's a priority. If they have adrenal, it tends to be a priority. If they have a thyroid, it tends to be a priority. So, for example, someone with thyroid, my priority is to release this area, the lower SCM or stomach 9 area. Okay? But as I'm doing it, they want to bring back their bag. I knew that would happen. So there, I'm looking at releasing stomach 9. It's like I'm starting at the top because it's a thyroid. But as I'm checking which kidney point does the best job here, okay, it's kidney point plus stomach chi. possibly for thyroid. I'm also checking what does it do for the lower abdomen. Okay, I'm not just going, okay, kidney 7 did the best, or kidney 9 did the best job for the thyroid, but if it didn't do anything for the abdomen and the other one did a better job for the abdomen, I'll choose the one that does the best job for both. So I am starting at what looks like the top, and I'm actually also clearing the bottom. Okay? And again, these are just ideas. Start with the foundation and move up towards the roof. Okay, because you can't build a house without a foundation. So it can save me in the back. I'm going to try and clear the lower back and move upwards if I can. Okay? It's just an idea. Yes.
I don't know if you want to go into this now, but liver 12, spleen 12 area, when it's positive, like there's pressure, pain there.
How do you release it?
Yeah, can you go over that?
Yeah.
And I know there could be another etiology for that.
Yeah. No, if you think it's just purely structural, quote unquote, like it's just starting structurally, you check. So we're saying it's liver 12, but it can be kidney channel, liver channel, or spleen channel. Okay, so even though I'm calling it liver 12, or Kiiko will call it spleen 12, it can be any one of these channels. Okay, so if it's on the kidney, it's tightly. I mean, if they go out, you don't want to needle into it. Okay, kidney 7 will probably release it. If it's on the spleen channel, spleen 9 will probably release it, and if it's on the liver channel, liver 4 will probably release it. That's just probably, it's not 100% guarantee. But that would be the way I would look at it. Unless there, yeah, and if there's some clear, medical history thing that suggests that, like, I don't know, some brain injury that's, I'm just making that up, then I treat the brain injury in order to treat this sort of thing.
What if it, so if it might be due to pelvic shift or something, can it be due to
It
pelvic shift?
could be due to pelvic shift, but in which case you have to do sacroiliac first, which you really don't want to do because you don't want to turn them over. So I would just let it be what it will be. You should be able to release it with something. If it's really pelvic shift, you can try 1-8 and see how it affects it. Not that common for me to say, wow, pelvic shift and only pelvic shift can undo it. So in autonomic nervous system on the back, we do 2, small intestine 9-10, UB17, UB16 area we call autonomic nervous system shoe. Okay? Or you will hear this expressed as asthma shoe, you will hear it expressed as insomnia shoe. Okay, so we tend to needle out, and then we needle the tight upper thoracics. Now, if you can, I would do moxa on UB17, on the insomnia shoe. Okay? Now, since insomnia is often autonomic nervous system issue, we also use in the center of the heel of the foot. The center of the heel is called, is an insomnia point also. That would definitely use moxa. You can needle it, so you can, but we do prefer moxa. And that's considered a point also for pain. It's considered an endorphin releasing point.
And what?
Endorphin releasing point, therefore it's used for pain. So in other words, that point is related to autonomic nervous system. And you can see, like when we did this thing of standing up and pressing, I mean, if your center of the heel is not on the floor, if you're kind of standing on your toes, you're going to be pretty jittery. Okay? So if the center of the heel is pressing on the floor, then there's going to be an up and down motion, and then your nervous system is going to be toned a lot better. So you can see how your heel has to do. Some people like this explanation that it's between the yin channel and the yang channel, therefore affects insomnia. But that does not explain, unfortunately, why it's supposed to release endorphins. Okay, so, we all come with our own ideas.
Quickly just the number for the UB that was the ANS shoe, the asthma shoe, the...
16, 17.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
All right, we talked about,
I don't know if you're going to touch on this, and I haven't quite understood the difference when you're looking at this this way or its modalities, difference between autonomic and sympathetic dominance. And
sympathetic dominance is a phrase that Kiiko likes to use. And I like the phrase autonomic nervous system. And the reason why, When Nagano came up with a system, okay, it was probably 50s, 60s. I'm assuming, I don't know, but that's my guess. The autonomic nervous system until about the 1990s was considered to be sympathetic, parasympathetic, and the two shall not meet except in sex. That literally comes out of the textbook. I did not invent this. Okay, that's literally what the textbook says. In today's world, we recognize that there's actually more going on. Okay. For example, when we talk about enteric nervous systems, that's still an autonomic nervous system. Okay. The autonomic nervous system is just not seen quite so strongly as on-off. Also, we recognize that on the one hand, everybody put your feet on the floor. Close your eyes and breathe out 3 times. See yourself in the room. In the center of the room, there's a box filled with balloons, already blown up. Pick up a balloon of a color you really like and take it to the window or the door of the room. If the window or door are not open, open them up. And allow yourself to float up. Let the balloon float you up into the sky. Hover up here in the sky until you see a place you really like. When you see that place, give the balloon string a little tag and land in a place you really like. Feel the air on your skin. Notice what time of day it is. Enjoy being here. Take a deep breath and open your eyes. I'm willing to bet that most of you landed in a place like a meadow, a beach, possibly a cloud. If I ask you what time it will be something like morning. I mean, there'll be a quality of light, maybe the sunrise, sunset, something, but it'll be light. There's going to be space and light in a place you really like. Okay. If you landed in a coffee shop in Paris where you met your most beloved person, that's a place you really like, that makes sense. It doesn't have space or light, okay, but it makes sense. Okay, you interpreted the exercise in a particular way, and that's fine. If, on the other hand, you landed in a dark cave with a bunch of wolves or scorpions or snakes in it, I think you should consider some psychiatric drugs. Okay, there's something wrong with you if that's the place you really like. Okay, I'm serious. I mean, I'm hoping that doesn't appeal to it. That's not someone's case here. All right, what this exercise shows you is that healing involves space and light. Okay, so we've got to supply that first. Therefore, it's very odd for us to be able to say parasympathetic dominance is a problem. Okay, it's just never going to work for us, mentally to say you're parasympathetic dominant and that's your problem. It actually does exist. Okay, it doesn't exist a lot in our society, but this is what does exist. Okay, you have people who are first of all, there are people whose nervous system is built so that the parasympathetic tends to respond more strongly, and they will tend to have, for example, diarrhea because they're always able to digest. These are also people who, we think heartburn is from the tight person, but actually, if the stomach is always ready to digest and there's no food, the stomach's always producing acid. So actually, they can be a parasympathetic dominant. It's very odd. Okay. So, and this is where, so we get used to this phrase sympathetic dominance, because all problems are because we're all too uptight. Okay? But what happens in the body? You're stressed out, you're uptight, blah, blah, blah. Eventually, your capacity, all the receptors, cortisol receptors, are, they're like dead. It's like we no longer respond to stress. We basically became parasympathetic dominant. Even though it's not because the parasympathetic nervous system is strong, it's because the sympathetic system is actually done. This is where you get the people who, like, you ask them, is this better? Is this better? I don't know. Maybe, can you try again? I mean, they look like, yo man, surfer dude, but they're not, okay? But they're also not, that sound. Well, I think it's 5% better, but if you try a little bit higher, it will be 20% better. How do you know if I tried a little higher? 10% better. That's a sympathetic dominant type, okay? But most of the people who I'm saying to you are autonomic nervous system types are actually not quite that. They're actually, there's a huge mix between autonomic and, no one can tell exactly how this is. So it's just a phrase in society that we talk about, sympathetic dominance sounds like type A and we talk about stress. Whereas if I say, if I take the opposite and talk about parasympathetic dominance, it's not going to work. Okay, it just mentally, it doesn't work for us. So for Kiiko, she says sympathetic dominance. I basically am naming it autonomic nervous system dysfunction disorder. Okay, the nervous system doesn't adjust. At the end of the day, whether you call it sympathetic dominance or not. Now, there are some places where it's, you can say it's more this versus that, okay? So for example, the person who's constipated, and it's related to the nervous system, because they can be constipated, they can be totally parasympathetic dominant, but if they don't drink enough water, they're still going to be constipated. But if it's clearly, you believe it's related to the nervous system, you're going to say that the constipation comes from sympathetic dominance. Whereas something like diarrhea, you're going to say that it has more parasympathetic capacity. Okay? So you have some ways to test it, like which one do you think is more dominant in the body. So for example, Nagano said, I can't guarantee that's 100% true, pressing both kidney 27s makes the body more sympathetic. Okay, don't confuse that with the fact that we needle it in the adrenal treatment. That you just spread. So people who say have heartburn, and you press Rent 17, say, or Rent 15, and it's very painful. You press kidney 27, and then it gets better, and they feel released from the burning. It's because you gave them. That's the type that it's that parasympathetic feedback. They're in parasympathetic mistaken feedback that tells the stomach to produce acid, and then that acid just has nowhere to go because you're not eating at the same time. Okay, so there's a confused nervous system here. So that's a way to create, for a moment, a sympathetic reaction in the body and see if that affects the body. The opposite point is under this, if you take your second toe, that's the toe, and you bend it where it meets the ball of the foot, we call it the foot poisoning point. Okay? That's a point that makes the body more parasympathetic. Okay? Because what happens in food poisoning? Okay? It's not that the nervous system decided, okay, I'll have diarrhea, but what happens is the nervous system got forced into a parasympathetic mode of just like expelling everything. Okay? Now it's interesting because in food poisoning you would think that it would be a sympathetic reaction. Okay? You took something that's wrong, you're supposed to fight it, but actually what you got was a parasympathetic reaction. Okay? So that's why it's all so confusing and not so clear what's going on. So if you want to see that if I make the body more parasympathetic, how much, again, if you want to start classifying people, you can use, but not necessarily in treating, just in touching to say, okay, which one does better, and then you can say, okay, it's what I'm saying is, I'm just saying it's an autonomic nervous system disorder, and you need to rebalance the sympathetic and parasympathetic, and I'm not getting into the argument of which one is more dominant, because culturally we believe that it's the sympathetic more dominant that creates all the problem, because healing is a parasympathetic process. Like I'm saying, you've got to release the vagus nerve. It's a parasympathetic nerve in order for all the organs to function normally. I've got to release the phrenic nerve. in order for the diaphragm to send back parasympathetic. So everything that we do is generally aiming at parasympathetic feedback. Okay? But not always, so you need some sort of adjustment, and that's why I can't say Sancho 8 creates a parasympathetic feedback. I can say it adjusts the nerve, it allows the nervous system to adjust.
Alright, just
Okay.
this is the point, but you said pressing the food poisoning point makes the body more parasympathetic?
More
More
simple.
sympathetic, and kidney 27 makes you more parasympathetic. Because if food poison is a parasympathetic response,
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
not
I'm
trying to
sorry,
make
yeah.
them work, right?
This is a sympathetic, yeah, this creates, because there's 2 points that you can test to make the body more sympathetic. I'm sorry, you're absolutely correct, sorry. Under the second toe, the food poisoning point and kidney 27 both create a sympathetic response in the body. Okay?
A sympathetic.
They're both creating a sympathetic response in the body, which we generally do not want to create, but there are people with a parasympathetic, at that point they're in a parasympathetic loop, and you need to break that loop.
It seems odd that we would include kidney 27, making
I know,
part of the adrenal.
I know, wait. No, I said pressing it, that's not the same as needling it. And it's just for a second. Plus, wait. The reason it's in adrenal treatment is to calm the parathyroid. But let's say it creates let's say we're agreeing with because all I know is that if you press on it, and yes, there are people with heartburn that it stops when you press kidney 27. And by the way, maybe some local effect may have nothing to do with the sympathetic, so we don't know. That's what he thought, that's what he said. I can't guarantee that. Let's say it creates a momentary sympathetic, so it kind of gives the adrenals a boost. It's not the end of the world, it's not a bad, it's actually kind of what you want. You want the adrenals to get boosted in adrenal treatment. So it's not like, but I would not confuse the fact that you can press this and, sort of say, okay, yes, you need some oomph in your body with the fact that it's using adrenal treatment. Because adrenal treatment is, what is adrenal treatment? To give you an oomph in the body. It's not about, calm down. Yes, boost the adrenals so that, because the calming really has to come from the brain. It's not really about the adrenals themselves.
I just want to clarify under the second toe, it seems like we're using it to slow rapid pulse.
Wait. That's here, where the toe meets the ball of the foot. But when the poisoning foot point is you bend the toe where it touches the ball of the foot. They're slightly different points.
Okay. And
under the third toe is autonomic nervous system point, especially for rapid pulse, not so much for slow pulse, and blood pressure.
Okay, thank you.
No, that's by the way another difference. Kiiko tends not to use under the third toe so much, nowadays. And she uses Sanjiao instead. She'll only use it for blood pressure problems. Whereas I use it for autonomic nervous system issues, not just for blood pressure. So there are just differences in styles. And I can tell you that she used to use under the third toe for autonomic nervous system. So, was that a question? All right. We talked about red light pulse. So the official line is right side stomach 24 plus left gallbladder 26. Originally it was just right side stomach 24. We added left gallbladder 26 because red line pulse often comes with spleen 20 on the left side. To release the pectoralis, gallbladder 26 is a very good point to release the pectoralis. Remember yesterday I showed you that if gallbladder 26 is tight, the pectoralis is tight, and then you can't lift the arm. If you release gallbladder 26, the arm releases. But quite honestly, Mushu does a better job. And a good friend of Mushu's is UB2. UB2 is a point also that releases endorphins. For Nagano, UB2, as opposed to Yin Tang, represents the upper dantian. And UB2, so UB2 is an endorphin releasing point. It also releases the diaphragm. It's also a good point for pain along the shoulders, especially small intestine channel. It's also it's a reflex. It's a hormonal reflex, as well as the treatment point for hormonal. UB1 in the Ling Shu is called Ming Men. Okay? The character Ming Men appears 4 times in the Ling Shu, which actually, each time it appears twice in the same sentence, so it really appears twice. It is not referred to Du Tu because it very clearly, it refers to the bladder channel and it says Ming Men is in the eye. That's why the character Ming Men appears twice. It says, it goes to Ming Men and Ming Men is in the eye. So clearly that we'll talk about UB1. Okay? So that means that this area is a hormonal or, has something to do with endocrine factions, just as because that's Ming Men. That's what Ming Men would mean. So since UB1 is not a terribly nice point, Nagano takes UB2 as a substitute. I mean, it's like, most patients are not going to appreciate needling UB1. Okay, that's just the reality of it. Okay? But a good friend, Mushu is a good friend. Mushu's good friend is UB2 because the Mushu represents the lower dantian and UB2 will represent the upper dantian. And I know people love to ask me, so what would represent the middle dantian? I don't need one in the middle because I'm looking at 3 diaphragms. If I get both of them, I mean, you can say the stomach might, but it's not so important. Because if I get the upper and the lower dantian communicating, then middle dantian will open up the middle dantian. But the middle dantian is really represented by anything above the diaphragm. Okay, so it's about opening the diaphragm. Okay, since UB2 does that anyway, I don't need something else to specifically open the middle dantian. Okay. All right. You have someone's coming at 10:30, correct? Okay, so that's like in 5 minutes. So my suggestion, goodness, you can get a break in 5 minutes. But don't go to buy right away, it will take 3 hours.